They left the college town in a car that smelled like cold coffee and wet scarves, finals still humming in their bodies as they promised this would be the weekend they finally slept. Ava kept a spiral notebook in her lap, sketching routes and a list for the cabin, eggs, batteries, cocoa, while Jessie watched the dashboard temperature tick downward a degree at a time. Riley rode shotgun with a thermos between her knees. The plan felt simple. A last stretch through the mountains, a key in a lock, heat on, phones charging while snow did what it wanted outside. They argued gently about music and miles, then about whether to trust the map on Jessie's phone or the paper one Ava folded until the creases went white. They stopped at a diner whose chrome sign still worked, though 2 letters flickered. They took a booth beneath a print of a lake in summer. A waitress with a pencil behind her ear filled their mugs and said the corridor would be quiet if they beat the next band of weather. They texted families. Made it this far, one more push. Ava sent a blurry photo of pie. Jessie checked the route twice, Riley checked it once, and they chose the faster line along the water. When they paid, the receipt read 9:17 p.m. They carried leftovers into air that felt heavier than an hour earlier. The lot had gone slick. Their footsteps made a faint rubbery scuff. Jessie brushed frost from the windshield with his sleeve. The wipers cleared a narrow arc. The heater steadied. They pulled onto the main road, and the night closed around them in a way that made the diner feel already distant. A state traffic camera caught their silver sedan as it entered a sparsely patrolled route, angling through low mountains and lakes pressed up against the shoulder. A freezing drizzle began just after 9:30, thin enough to look harmless, cold enough to pull heat from bare pavement until it became a film. Riley turned the vent away from her face. Ava ate a forkful of leftovers, the sweetness steadying her stomach. Jessie checked the rear view and thought he saw lights far back, maybe a truck, maybe reflection. They talked about the cabin as if it were already theirs, who would take the loft, who would start a fire in the morning. At 9:41 p.m., Riley changed the song. The music app registered the switch, a tiny digital footprint that would later become the last firm point on a drifting line. Nothing in the car felt like a last moment then. A turnout's lights came and went on the right, past mile markers that meant nothing to them, the route pinched between rock and water. A weather advisory issued at 9:20 never reached their screens. The signal had been inconsistent since before the diner. Jessie held to his lane through a long, blind curve. Ava rested her head against the cold window, the glass buzzing with tire vibration. Riley slid the phone face down on her leg. The road looked like road until it didn't. After the 9:41 change, there were no more calls, no more texts, not even the harmless clutter of notifications that usually find a way through. A read receipt someone waited for in another town never arrived. The car became a private world moving through an emptier one, and whatever happened inside it left almost nothing to hold later except that single timestamp and the blank that followed. By midnight, the rental cabin's porch light burned over snow that hadn't been stepped in. The owner's phone went to voicemail as 3 sets of parents in separate houses tried not to call and then called anyway. No answer. Then rings, then voicemail again. A mother left a message that tried to sound casual and failed. When the hour slid past and the driveway stayed empty, the calls shifted from the kids to one another. "Have you heard anything?" turned into, "When did you hear last?" and then into silence, while everyone listened to a different kind of quiet. A patrol car drifted through the corridor on routine loops no one thought would matter. Morning came without contact. The road wore a hard shine even in weak sun. Somewhere along that corridor, the car had either taken a place to pull over or never found one. It had either slowed for the curve or carried too much quiet speed into whatever waited beyond. None of that was knowable yet. For now, anyway. What could be measured were the things left behind, the last receipt, the last music change, the last message told to a machine. In kitchens and living rooms, parents squinted at maps, tracing a route they had never driven, learning the names of lakes they had never planned to say. Someone tried the cabin again and left another message. By the time the first deputy knocked to say they were checking, the day had already decided its theme. The missed arrival became a welfare check. The welfare check became a bee on the lookout, and a pushpin on a county map became the center of a hallway. Everyone began to pace. Snow found its way into the seams of boots as the first cruiser headed toward the corridor, and the clock on the window that matters most, the first 24 hours, started running whether anyone was ready or not. They begin with what cannot be argued, a receipt time-stamped 9:17 p.m., listing coffee, pie, and a full tank. That strip becomes the first pin on the board. A trooper copies it, circles the time, and calls dispatch to pull traffic feeds. 11 minutes later, a roadside sensor records a plate sequence at 9:28, consistent with the car the clerk rang up. The corridor they entered is notorious for long gaps in patrol, blind curves, and water tight to the shoulder. Pins feel like progress, but the space between them is where cases slip. At 9:20 p.m., 3 minutes after the trio left the diner, the regional office issued a winter weather advisory. Freezing drizzle was bonding to sub-zero pavement. The bulletin named mile markers, where black ice forms beyond curves and where the grade drops toward brush and rock. Lakes sit past the sightline, pools. Of dark, the road hides at night. Units received the notice, the stretch is a dead zone. The message moved through servers while their car moved through cold. Canvas teams fanned out to the gas station, the diner, and 2 rest areas bracketing the route. The diner's night clerk remembered them because their playlist jumped from a ballad to a thrash song, and they all laughed. He recalled the tall one asking for a map, in case the mountains kill the signal, and the girl smoothing the folds like she wanted the paper to behave. He pointed to the empty slot on the rack. The register showed a cash sale. Small, but it proved they planned for the signal to die and kept going. At 9:36 p.m., a trucker's dash cam farther up the highway captured a compact car with a mismatched headlight. The image was smeared by micro-ice, but when paused, the beams were clearly uneven. The trooper printed the still and taped it beside the receipt, and the sensor hit. 3 points, 1 line. Between them lay a span of 40 miles, threaded with guardrail and unlit pullouts. If the car left there, it left the realm of quick discovery. The map on the folding table filled with layered plastic, contours, culverts, pullouts, unofficial turnarounds. Guardrails repaired last summer were marked in green, rails still waiting for work in orange. Deputies who had worked fatalities on that corridor pointed out curves that fool even slow drivers, where a slight crown drifts a wheel enough that ice decides the rest. The incident commander said a primary search corridor of 40 miles and a secondary of 10 more. Water on both sides for most. Every mile was a possibility. Possibilities cost time. Procedure outran feeling. Daylight, paired units travel opposite directions, logging every scuff in frost and every signpost skinned by a bumper. Midday, pull additional transportation camera dumps from towns that bookend the route in case the car escaped the net. Afternoon, coordinate with the county dive team and a volunteer sonar crew to prioritize coves aligned with likely launch paths. Evening. Watch bends where debris collects when the ice breaks. Overnight, phone records, card pings, and the thin hope a signal wakes up. A detective called the weather desk to lock the minutes. The meteorologist read, drizzle at 9:05, advisory at 9:20, first black ice report at 9:31, near mile 212. Those times were circled in red. Another detective phoned highway maintenance. A supervisor faxed a sheet of recent guardrail strikes. Terminal head damaged, splice replaced, posts reset. 2 locations overlapped with the advisory's hotspots. Ordinary names for bends became warnings. Back at the diner, the clerk tried to remember more. He focused on the map, the joke about the playlist, the moment they doubled back for leftovers, keeping the car in the lot an extra minute. That minute now felt heavy. The advisory had been live by then. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. The window they were chasing might be only hours wide. Searchers drove the corridor at first light. It revealed no drama, only small facts. A patch of frost disturbed where a sedan might have kissed the shoulder and corrected. A fan of gravel fresh from a blade, a drag where a deer crossed. They stopped at pullouts and stood still. The water below was flat and tea-stained. Steep banks swallowed edges. The road ran forward with the same painted confidence that tricks people into thinking it is safe. The families were told what could be said without lighting panic. There was a timeline with 3 points. There was weather that closed paths. There was a corridor nobody could shorten. A parent asked whether a bad headlight mattered on ice. A trooper said yes, then maybe, then promised to check bulbs if and when they had a car to check. Everyone heard the order of those words and carried it. By late morning, a storm cell that had been rumor showed its edge and shook out new ice. Radios hissed. A deputy knocked frost from a fender and felt it refreeze as he breathed. In kitchens miles away, parents laid phones face down so they wouldn't watch the gap between vibrations. The command post printed fresh grids and sharpened pencils that didn't need it. The wind kept rising. The window had narrowed to hours, maybe less, and the road ahead, which looked like any road, was about to show how fast it could erase a car. The command post goes up in a borrowed firehouse bay, where exhaust stains stripe the cinder block and a coffee urn rattles when the door blows open. County deputies sign beside state police on a clipboard. Volunteers set up folding tables, and someone tapes a 40-mile map across lockers like a bandage over a wound. At first light, a helicopter noses up, pretending the ceiling will lift. 5 minutes later, it bounces back, rotors shedding sleet, the pilot saying he can skim treetops or keep the aircraft safe, but not both. Ground search becomes the only search that can move. Canvases start where roads meet warmth. Lodges get knocks, truck stops get flyers. Rest areas get the questions officers learn to ask at 3 in the morning. A clerk at a 24-hour fuel station lists 2 rigs in a minivan, then shrugs. Nobody remembers 3 college kids in a silver sedan. Automatic license plate readers are queried beyond the corridor on every outbound ramp for 3 counties. After 9:28 p.m., there are 0 matches. If the car exited, it did so where the cameras do not look. Cell companies answer exigent requests with voices. 2 phones show last activity in the same sector, a pie slice of terrain covering highway, lakeshore, and a string of dark vacation cabins. The 3rd phone goes quiet earlier. The record notes a battery at 2%, a small detail that grows large when hope shrinks. Engineers explain timing advance and sector overlap to a speakerphone that crackles over space heaters. The detective writes what matters on the whiteboard. 2 last. Pings, same sector. 1 earlier, weaker. It does not make a location, but it makes a shape. Day teams work the shoulder in pairs, calling out mile markers in voices ironed flat by cold. They pause at fresh posts and at ones bent long ago, tapping guardrail with knuckles and logging anything that sounds wrong. A trooper brushes ice from a bolt and finds a smear of plastic transferred from some past bumper. It goes on a list that lengthens by the hour. The road offers dozens of almosts that feel like maybes until a second look makes them nothing. Almosts have to be respected anyway. They cost time, and time is already thin. Dive teams stage where the bank relents. The lakes are tannin-stained and tea-dark. Light dies after a few feet. A skin of ice skitters when the wind shifts, sharp enough to cut glove fabric. Dry suits slide in, cheeks going white before masks seat. 6 feet down, water turns from green to brown to blind. When they surface, air feels like punishment. We need sonar, someone says, but the forecast reads gusts and squalls. The side scan crew promises to launch when weather cooperates. Weather, today, does not. To keep minutes from leaking, the incident commander runs loops with a clipboard. Abandoned vehicle calls from snowplows are checked and cleared. A K-9 team searches the diner and the gas station. The dog tracks interest to door chimes and salt bins, then loses it on the asphalt, exactly as expected. The trucker's dash cam that caught a compact with a mismatched headlight is cloned, hashed, and logged into evidence. Highway maintenance faxes a list of recent guardrail repairs. 2 locations overlap with black ice markers from the weather advisory. Those bends are circled twice. By early afternoon, the helicopter sits with skids frosting, and crews orbit the 1 working heater. A volunteer spreads last year's aerials and traces creek channels that might draw a car down, and the coves where silt piles in soft fans. A deputy who has worked drownings on this corridor circles the obvious places and tells anyone new that water prefers obvious. They talk angles, approach, deflection, launch, and how speed on ice erases steering. Out on the lake, a gust breaks the thin crust and slides it against the bank like panes of glass. Parents arrive in twos, wind-chapped, clutching folders they believe might persuade physics. They bring printouts of phone logs, screenshots with circles and arrows, hand-drawn maps that try to tame hills they have not seen. A detective says what he can without offering false certainty. 2 last pings, same sector, 1 earlier, towers lie in mountains. He promises to ask carriers again. He does not say the board has accepted the corridor's logic. If a car leaves the roadway at the wrong angle here, it falls where eyes cannot follow. Evening shows up fast. The bay smells like diesel and wool. Someone's aunt sends food nobody touches. A deputy discovers his gloves have frozen into the shape of hands that wore them. Report stack, canvas notes, negative ALPR returns, dive logs that read like prayers ending in blanks. The plan for tomorrow hardens in dry marker. Launch the volunteer side scan boat if wind breaks, bring a second K9 team for rest areas, widen the shoulder sweep beyond mile 210. Under it, somebody writes one word, patience. Night is the shift that lets thoughts move. With the radios quiet, the math runs itself. A corridor with water on both sides, ice that shortens margins, 3 phones that went still before morning. The whiteboard holds the square of facts no matter how many times it is erased and redrawn. When weather pins the skilled indoors, something else comes to fill the space. It starts as whispers and arrives as certainty, and by dawn, the search will have to share the room with stories. For now, anyway. The tips arrive faster than the board can absorb them. A jealous ex who never let go, a hitchhiker at the diner with a military patch, a rumor that cartel crews use logging roads as staging grounds. Each caller sounds certain, each becomes a number, a name, a pin. Detectives divide the pile into people, vehicles, and places, and start where motive seems plausible and records might exist. The ex goes first. He dated Ava the previous spring and texted too often after the breakup. 2 detectives arrive before work hours, take his statement, and secure his phone with consent. A quick handset download shows ordinary use and a burst of jokes in a group chat about a spilled drink during a game. Carrier records anchor his device to the same 2 towers from 7 p.m. past midnight. The car's built-in GPS logs a round trip to a grocery at 8:12 and home by 8:26. A co-worker's time card shows him on a night shift at 10:03 p.m., and router logs from his apartment register gaming traffic during the window. The trio vanished. He is ruled out. The hitchhiker tip spreads because it feels like a story. The clerk remembers a young man, a pack with a stitched flag, in the sense he lingered. Patrol checks shelters and bus depots in a 3-town radius and pulls bus manifests for the last runs. They find one backpacker who slept at a church and another who rode through after midnight. Neither matches the description. The vestibule camera over the diner door gives silhouettes and reflections whenever the interior light flares. Without a plate or a direction of travel, the lead dries up. The red pickup consumes a day because multiple callers mention a man who stared too long while the students paid for fuel. A partial plate is wrong by 2 characters, but an analyst runs permutations and filters by model and color until one returns. The truck belongs to a water systems technician whose routes change daily. He produces maintenance logs signed on site, and his employer provides route sheets stamped by an automated yard gate. A way station camera captures his plate well south at 9:34 p.m. He is placed miles away and cleared. The cartel rumor lingers because fear speaks with authority. An email claims grids of light on a decommissioned spur and barrels under tarps. Deputies drive the spurs until brush scrapes doors and sap stings the nose. They find a deer blind littered with beer cans, ruts thawing around an old fire ring, and a heap of tires half buried in snow. No fresh tracks, no barrels, no camp beyond windbreaks thrown up a winter ago. The report reads, searched, negative. Online, theories multiply without the friction of weather or fuel. A woman posts that she saw the trio at a rest area 2 counties away. The photo's metadata shows it was taken the prior weekend, and the sedan in frame is a different make. Another account claims Riley sent a midnight message. The profile is a clone created after news broke. A third insists an organized ring uses the corridor as a pipeline. When asked for dates, the user stops replying. Detectives triage without arguing. The assistant district attorney reminds the team that chasing phantoms burns public trust, and overtime they don't have. The families sit through briefings that feel like tide charts. A detective explains how phone records establish absence with the same authority that video establishes presence. They learn phrases like no corroboration and consistent with, and try to live with what those mean. The X is crossed off, the hitchhiker is downgraded, the red truck is cleared by documentation and location. A mother asks if the board is more about removing suspects than finding her child. The detective says both, because eliminating is part of finding. By week's end, the suspect table is thin. The column labeled corridor evidence is not. It lists a frost scuff that might be a brushback correction, a splice where guardrail was replaced months earlier, and the weather advisory that went live 3 minutes after the diner receipt. The dashcam, still of a compact with uneven headlights, sits at the edge of the map like a flag no one can plant. Nothing points cleanly toward an abductor, a chase, or a planned detour. The pattern keeps circling the same facts: road, curve, water. The simplest line is the least satisfying. It reads, a slight drift on crown, a low guardrail strike at the wrong angle, a slide that ends in a lake that swallows sight and sound. It leaves no villain to hate and no promise of a confession. It asks the families to accept that the last place their children existed might be under silt and leaves, and that answers can be both probable and hidden. It asks the search to stop hunting faces and start measuring slopes and entry vectors. Before the lights go out, the lead detective writes 3 items on tomorrow's plan. Return to mile 212, confirm guardrail repair dates, prioritize side scan when wind drops. He pushes the rumor stack into a labeled box and slides it under the table. Outside, the corridor locks back into ice. In the morning, the work will go where rumors cannot follow, down into water that keeps its own counsel. Crash analysts walked the corridor with measuring wheels and cold reddened hands. They crouched at guardrail ends and splices, checked post spacing against the plan book, and read faint scuffs in asphalt. Where frost heaves lifted the lane, they marked launch angles and imagined a compact sedan finding the wrong inch at the wrong speed. They measured the pitch toward water and the distance from stripe to rail where tires lose choices. Any section reworked since summer earned a fresh look. New bolts meant new reasons. A splice near mile 212 or a shallow outward bow, not enough to photograph easily, but enough for a gloved palm to feel a hit's memory. The rail caught flecks of paint, 2 shades lighter than factory silver. Down the posts, bright scars showed where a wrench turned in recent months. A maintenance foreman confirmed terminal heads had been replaced in September and again in early November after minor strikes. Farther on, a strip of asphalt bore a thin diagonal polish where studded tires bit last week. Beside it, a darker smear curved toward the shoulder and vanished. Analysts argued in low voices about whether it was correction or coincidence. Past the smear, the shoulder narrowed to a ribbon. 20 feet below, water lay flat and brown, cattails trapped under new ice. Divers chose the coves where slope, curve, and absence line up. They dressed in wind that erased fingers. The surface skim cracked around ankles and reformed behind them. The lake's tannins turned the world tea by 4 feet, coffee by 8. Beyond that, touch took over. Submerged timber reached from the bottom. When fins brushed it, silt rose in slow clouds and ate the light. They set search lines between buoys and pulled their way grid by grid. Twice a diver stopped on something that felt like a pillar, only to find a stump chewed smooth by time. Once a weight snagged on wire, held, then gave way, and returned as rust flakes on a glove. A mask leaked and made a face go white. The log read, "Equipment difficulty, dive terminated, reschedule when wind allows." On Saturday, a private team trailered in a side-scan sonar rig and the optimism people bring when they believe technology can outshout water. They launched at first light, laptops open, a heater making promises it could not keep. The first hour drew clean images of bottom features, sand ripples, brush islands, one long shadow that turned into a log when they changed the angle. Then, the air made its play. Batteries died faster than predicted. GPS drifted when the antenna iced over. The towfish cable stiffened and sent little shocks into a gloved wrist. They bumped sensitivity, adjusted range, and restarted programs wearing gloves they could not remove without losing feeling. A pass returned something trapezoidal and promising, then dissolved into noise when rerun. They marked it anyway. They promised to come back when the wind quit and the devices remembered how to be consistent. On shore, a father asked what the screen showed. The operator said bright could be rock, shadow could be brush, shape could be a car, and also not a car. The father stared at the map of the unseen and nodded because his body understood what his mind refused. By afternoon, the forecast stopped hinting and arrived. The lake skinned over in sheets that chased one another until a pane broke and slid under the next. Snow came without drama and changed everything anyway. The incident commander pulled crews in and wrote the words nobody likes writing but everyone recognizes: suspend for weather. He studied the whiteboard as the room emptied and saw arrows that kept pointing to water as if it were a partner that refused to speak. The families held rescue like it might warm if they kept it close. Detectives began using recovery behind closed doors and in reports because procedure demands honesty that language resists. Someone boxed the flyers. A deputy rolled a spare set of dry suits and stowed them in a bin labeled "next time." The maintenance foreman left repair logs and circled dates. Night returned the valley to ordinary silence. The corridor gave nothing back. A mother took her child's folded map from the table where it had lived since the call and refolded it wrong, then right, then wrong again, the same way Ava had smoothed its creases in the diner. She told herself there were places divers had not reached, angles sonar had not yet tried, a pocket of air someone might have found and kept. It was something to hold when evidence refused to bend. By Sunday, the storm closed the door on intention, and the lake looked like a finished sentence. The command post released volunteers and promised updates after thaw and when the side scan could run clean. The detective who kept the file on his desk slipped the last receipt into a plastic sleeve so it would not soften at the edges. Water had been offered new questions and handed back the same surface. The next memo called the case ongoing. The next day acted like any other day. And the year ahead began to gather, quiet and heavy, with a clock that would not stop just because 3 families asked it to. By Monday, hope thinned into routine, and the water kept its answers for later and longer. Spring arrives without ceremony, and for a week the corridor pretends to be ordinary. Snow slumps into ditches, ice pulls back from cattails, and the color of the lake changes from iron to tea. A county worker clearing a service road finds a backpack tucked beneath wind-thrown limbs. He radios it in and waits, boots in flattened grass as deputies bag and tag it on the hood of a cruiser. For an hour the air in the command post changes, like phones might start ringing again. Then the inventory reveals what hope ignored: wrong brand, wrong initials, wrong story. The bag belongs to a hiker who cut across the brush last season and never came back for it. The hour empties out on itself, and the case returns to what it was before: facts that don't move and a road that refuses to answer. Online, strangers organize themselves into helpers. A former trail runner starts a public map and invites layers. Last purchase, cell sectors drawn as pie slices, known crash sites marked by year and severity, drownings flagged in black, deer crossing data in yellow, and wind direction the night they vanished, pulled from a station 2 ridgelines over. Someone adds maintenance work orders for guardrails, another marks unlisted pullouts and unofficial turnarounds. A civil engineer posts about stopping distances on ice and failure angles in old rail terminals, complete with equations and annotated photos. The map changes by the hour. It looks like movement, and sometimes it is, but it can't put a car where nobody has seen one. Ava's mother learns to ask the state for its memory. She files requests for patrol logs, repair dates, emergency tower notes, photographs from the days after the storm, and any mention of strikes or splices between mile 206 and 216. Envelopes arrive smelling like the school office she once volunteered in. Pages appear under black rectangles where names and lines should be. One sentence repeats across packets until it feels like a verdict on paper. Weather precluding comprehensive lake survey. She tapes that line above the sink so she won't lose it, then hates it for how easily it stays. At the kitchen table, the families try to behave like people who still live here. Riley's father returns to work and learns he can speak in short paragraphs and not much longer. Jessie's sister runs a loop around a reservoir because the ache feels like proof she's awake. The cabin owner mails back the unused key with a note that says he's sorry and that he still keeps the porch light on when storms move through. The house where Ava grew up grows quiet in the late afternoon, the way hospitals go quiet after visiting hours. And the quiet teaches everyone how long an hour can be. The private sonar crew returns in June with repaired gear and steady voices. They tow the fish along coves the analysts prioritized, then crisscross at different ranges, turning bottom into grayscale sheets. The operator names what the screen suggests in plain words: shelf, brush, trench, probable log. Twice a shape arrives that silences the boat, once a long wedge, once a squat trapezoid. The first proves to be a ledge when they pass at a better angle. The second dissolves into noise when they try again. The crew logs both as anomalies of interest and promises to return if wind and time agree. By late summer, the map feels like a town square. Volunteers trade theories with the fixed politeness people use when they are one sentence from a fight. A user posts that a convenience store camera caught the trio 2 counties away. The timestamp places the clip the weekend before. Another swears a drone video shows a gray sedan, nosed into a tree line. The make is wrong. The civil engineer keeps posting about failure angles and guardrail memory, small bends only hands can feel. The detective prints it all and keeps the pages in a folder so Hope will have something to hold that isn't only air. Autumn paints the corridor and dares anyone to notice beauty. The detective visits mile markers when he should be home, standing where the shoulder narrows and the rail shows a shallow, outward buoy a photograph can't prove. He writes lake names in a pocket notebook, not to remember them, but to prove the year can be held to paper. He draws a rectangle where the car could be, then folds the page and puts it away, as if refolding could change the drawing. At the office, the file stays on his desk instead of in a box, its edges softening under elbows and coffee rings. The first anniversary arrives, and the families choose a courthouse lawn over the water because wind there eats words. Last year's vigil drew hundreds in cameras. This circle is smaller. People have jobs to return to and children to put to bed, and the world trains itself to move forward whether anyone grants permission. A pastor reads something simple about light in ordinary hours. The detective stands at the back and watches candles gutter in a breeze that shouldn't matter. Driving home, a mother checks her phone out of habit and finds what she always finds: a last thread ending cleanly, a contact without a new photo, and a screen that still lights the room. By morning, he's reassigned to property crimes, but the case doesn't leave. The folder rides shotgun to a new desk, edges softening under elbows and coffee rings. He keeps the board sketched inside a legal pad, 3 fixed points and the 40 miles between. Online, the map waits for fresh eyes. At the lake, early frost makes new glass. The year ends the way it began, with a road between water and rock and a silence nobody can out-talk. Tips thin, then spike each anniversary. A woman swears she saw Riley at a fairground 2 states away. A father drives through the night with photos and comes home with a gas receipt. A drone pilot freezes a frame on a gray sedan under spruce. The badge is the wrong year, and the plate belongs to a teacher. A hiker finds bones near a creek. A deputy lifts a deer skull from leaves while the caller apologizes. The board logs each tip and moves on. Life settles into durable shapes. Insurance policies reach sunset dates and send letters that sound official and far away. 2 student loans are discharged after forms and waiting. The phrase total and permanent lands like a verdict no one wants. Parents return to jobs that do not care about lakes or maps. Mornings start with small rituals. Open the email from strangers, skim the map thread, touch the last receipt before the day resumes its ordinary demands. Grief shrinks enough to fit around errands and grows again at night when the house is honest. A civic group forms to shoulder what the families cannot. They raise money for fresh sonar and a small stipend for a weekend boat crew. A business matches donations. The high school gym hosts a benefit. The county accepts the check, then permits stall. A protected mussel nests in a cove where the grid must pass. A biologist wants a seasonal window, the county attorney indemnification, and the maintenance supervisor a cold weather plan. When signatures finally align, the water is wrong again. Elsewhere, drought drags reservoirs down and reveals roofs like coins in mud. National news runs montages of recovered cars that look inevitable once the water drops. Links arrive in the detective's inbox with subject lines that say simply this: the corridor's lake does not participate. Spring brings rain, summer heat, and the gauge hovers within 2 feet of last year. The detective stops watching other people's water and returns to his bend with the shallow bow and the rail he can feel with a thumb but cannot photograph. Online, the community map evolves into a quiet town square. Moderators archive tips with notes: wrong make, misdated clip, unverifiable source. The threads that remain are careful. A civil engineer named Naomi arrives late one night and asks for the state's standard drawings for guardrail terminals. She explains without flair how posts are numbered, how splices are oriented, and why a terminal face replaced without adjacent postwork raises questions. She links maintenance manuals anyone can read. People scroll past at first, then start bookmarking. Naomi works the corridor mile by mile. She opens Street View's timeline and saves frames months apart. She notes terminal faces that look new against weathered posts, soil evenly disturbed around 3 bases while the 4th is not, and splices shifted a ½ inch against a reflector. She pulls maintenance logs and marks repair dates. She overlays weather advisories from the night the trio vanished. Some entries match, others do not. The pattern is quiet but persistent. The families measure time by what ends. A lease is surrendered. A dog that slept in one bedroom grows stiff, then is gone. A storage unit rolls on autopay. Birthdays happen in smaller rooms. A mother keeps a voicemail she can recite and never presses play. The detective rotates through assignments and carries the folder to each new desk because boxing it feels like surrender. On a day off, he walks a stretch where the shoulder pinches and the rail leans out beyond the plan book, imagining a compact car meeting ice and losing choices. By the 4th winter, the civic group's sonar finally launches on a clear weekend. The passes are smooth, the operator calm, the images respectful. Logs masquerade as shapes worth hoping for until a new angle shows bark. They chart anomalies anyway and promise to revisit at a different range. The families thank them and go home to rooms that are unchanged. The detective writes anomaly, North Cove, uncertain in a notebook already crowded with words like that. The 5th anniversary vigil moves indoors. The circle is small enough that every name is heard. Afterward, Naomi lines up 3 frames from the same bend 6 months apart. In the first, the terminal head is dented. In the second, it is new. In the third, 2 posts down are new too, and the soil forms a clean crescent. The maintenance log has no work order that explains all 3. She adds a note to her map. Odd sequence. Verify in person. Night narrows to the part of the corridor that will not stop asking for attention. The lake still keeps its surface, and the families still wake to the same absence. The almosts have become weight, but so is something else. A patient suspicion that the answer is not a stranger or a rumor, but steel, angle, and ice at speed. Naomi refreshes the map, zooms 1 notch closer to the bend she has already studied, and prepares to follow that suspicion wherever it leads next. Naomi learned the corridor the way mechanics learn a stubborn engine, by feeling for patterns other people overlook. After midnight, at a kitchen table that had become a desk, she stepped through Google Street View's timeline, one frame at a time. Miles flattened into sequences of steel, posts, and seams. Guardrails read like sentences to her, each splice a comma, each terminal head an ending that revealed where something had hit and how someone later made it right. At mile 214, the rhythm broke. A splice sat where drawings suggested a continuous run, and the terminal head at the end carried a slightly different face, newer than its neighbors. She pulled the 2020 image and zoomed until pixels squared along the bolts. Two posts showed fresh galvanizing. Soil at their bases was raw and scalloped, the shape left by a bar working a hole and a boot packing it shut. A scraped crescent crossed the gravel shoulder. She wrote the date, then slid back to Street View's 2019 pass. The same run looked older, and above the rail a faint diagonal scrub line appeared when she tilted the screen. It sat inches higher than the flange, exactly where a compact's hood edge would travel if the car rose into the rail instead of being guided alongside it. Hunches needed math. She opened the state GIS portal, pulled contours, and converted the embankment's descent to degrees. She added the posted speed and a conservative coefficient for glaze ice. The numbers said a driver making a small correction a second late could arrive at that splice. At an angle the terminal head was never meant to forgive. Beyond the rail, the slope dropped to water within a handful of paces. She organized what she had into a clean narrative. Street frames 6 months apart went first, dented terminal, then new terminal, then additional posts replaced while the soil still showed a crescent of disturbance. Maintenance manuals sat beside them, highlighted to show how posts are numbered, where splices usually live, and why. A terminal face swapped without adjacent work can signal partial repair after an impact. A weather bulletin from the night the students vanished noted black ice near that mile, inside the same hour their last digital trace ended. She overlaid everything on one map and added a note anyone could understand. Steel keeps a memory. The write-up went on to the community map where families and a handful of specialists kept a thread from going dark. It did not accuse or pretend to solve the case. It asked for a specific look at a specific place. She sent the same packet by email to the detective who had never boxed the file. Her lines were plain and defensible, the kind a person rereads wanting to argue and instead finds themselves agreeing. Before dawn, he drove there. The early hour kept the corridor empty. Frost stitched the seams. He parked past the marker and walked back. Up close, the rail confirmed the notes, a terminal face with the dull brightness of recent metal, two posts with younger paint, a splice a half finger off center. He set his palm against the run and felt a shallow outward bow. Steel that has been moved and persuaded back never completely forgets where it went. He let the picture build. A compact sedan, legal speed, one headlight throwing shorter, the crown nudging it rightward, the correction too late for the angle demanded. At that approach, the terminal would not cradle and redirect. It would climb and lever. The lake below kept its surface still. A hood could have ridden that rail for the length of a breath and left only a faint diagonal polish a camera caught a year before the repair. Back at the office, he pulled the folder close and started dialing. He asked highway maintenance for full work orders at that mile, including post counts, crew lists, and any photos attached to closeout reports. He called the volunteer side scan crew to ask how fast they could stage if wind dropped and whether they could tow transects aligned with a launch from the splice. He emailed the district dive sergeant to flag a target worth planning for. The whiteboard took fresh ink across old boxes, mile 214, terminal replaced, posts replaced, splice offset, diagonal scrub in 2019 frame, disturbed soil in 2020 frame, black ice advisory in the right hour. The street frame stayed open on his screen while the room resumed its ordinary noise. In one, the disturbed soil could be just a repair. In another, once seen, the diagonal mark refused to be unseen. He printed the sequence and taped it where his eyes would land each time he looked up. The case that had been everywhere and nowhere now had a dot a person could stand on and a question that could be asked in one direction. At dusk, he went back with a tape and a level and measured what he could without theater. The metal kept its memory. The air kept its bite. Down the slope, the water kept its counsel. If weather allowed, the lake would be asked tomorrow in a single, careful voice. For the first time in years, the road was not only story and grief. It was a place that might give something back. The state dive team trailered in before sunrise and moved with a rhythm of lines, floats, and clipped voices. From the turnout above the bend Naomi had circled, they towed side scan along overlapping transects the detective drew. The screen rolled in grayscale as the lake bed slid by. Sand shelves, brush islands, soft silt humps. 18 feet off the slope, a trapezoid resolved, darker than bottom, throwing a shadow too sharp for rock, exactly the angle a roof would make. The operator marked it and ran the pass again from the opposite direction. The shape held. A buoy popped and claimed the spot. Divers built the plan in short sentences that fit the cold. 2 down on tether, 1 safety, lights, window punch, strap, lift bag if needed. They slid in where the embankment eased and let the line guide them into brown. Visibility died at an arm's length, then returned in flashes when silt fell away. A glove found steel where math said it would be. A beam swept a grill drowned in algae, then a windshield fractured into a quiet spider. The second diver located the B-pillar and cleared mud with a slow fan. They confirmed doors shut, windows intact, occupants visible. The signal came up the line. Rig for lift. On shore, the wrecker eased cable as the winch complained. Air pulled a cough of bubbles that smelled like rust and leaves. The car rose nose first, glass sloughing in brittle sheets, the interior shedding 6 years of riverbed in a dark spill. A fractured windshield clung in a mosaic and then sagged. Privacy tarps went up. A coroner's van idled with lights off while deputies formed a human wall. The lake went flat again. Inside were 2 occupants. The driver's seat held a body where the wheel would be if a face had not met it first. The rear bench held another against the door, knees turned as if bracing. Identification would come by dental and DNA, but the detective wrote the placements anyway. Jesse at the wheel, Ava in the rear. The front passenger seat sat empty. Its belt hung cleanly severed, ends even and frayed, pointing toward the floor. Divers confirmed they had not cut that strap. The note went into the log because details anchor what grief tries to drift. Crime scene protocol took over in open air. Technicians pulled the event data recorder and signed chain of custody with hands that would not warm. The module survived enough to speak in fragments. Speed 58, no brake recorded in the last 5 seconds, stability control active, steering input left, then right, then power loss. It read like a small panic on ice, the kind that steals distance and trades it for momentum. They documented damage that mattered and let the winners claim the rest. The hood carried a diagonal scrub where paint surrendered to steel at the height Naomi had calculated. The roof showed a shallow inward crease from a water strike, not from a roll. The driver's door was pinned by silt. A wallet and a phone slept under the rear floor mat, later confirmed as Jesse's and Ava's. The front passenger footwell offered only coins and grit. No phone, no wallet, no bag, absence. The coroner's preliminary notes spoke to time underwater and not much else. No sharp force trauma, no bullet, no binding. Fractures consistent with a sudden stop and intrusion. Toxicology would take weeks and return indifferent to suspense. The families were told the narrowest truth. 2 recovered, identification pending, investigation continuing. People walked toward the tarps and then stopped because feet and breath negotiated separate terms. Word moved faster than trucks. By afternoon, the turnout drew quiet strangers. The detective stepped under a pine and called each home, using names first and not rushing the silences. At the end of each call, he answered what nobody knew how to ask. The third seat was empty. A belt was cut. Divers did not make that cut. He did not add what the water suggested, that someone freed themselves here and did not come up where anyone could see. When the car reached the bay, text desilted slow, revealing small things that might matter. A parking receipt in a console seam, a soda cap under the driver's mat, a key on a lanyard for a cabin that never saw them. Mud yielded a broken plastic comb and a single earring back with no pair. They photographed the cut belt close, then bagged the section for tool mark analysis. Serrations can speak, though water lies. The phones were logged, dried, and queued for a lab that can revive data. By night, the corridor was itself again. Dark, edged with cold, indifferent. A buoy rode alone over the coordinates, marking a place that would not look different to anyone who had not watched what came out. Officially, there was no sign of foul play. Unofficially, there was the silence of one missing person and the clean ends of a strap that refused to explain itself. The board at the station took new photos and a pin pressed into mile 214. For the first time, the file had bodies, coordinates, and a trace of how the night went wrong, and still no answer to the question that would not stop asking where Riley went after the belt was cut. Tomorrow, the lake's secret would become a headline, but not the answer anyone sought. News breaks on a weekday morning and keeps its language careful. A guardrail anomaly spotted on Google Street View led searchers to a precise bend, and divers recovered a sedan from 18 feet of water with 2 people inside. The department credits citizen documentation of roadside repairs and map imagery, declines to name anyone, and publishes coordinates that feel like a promise finally kept. Calls go to families first, then to a community that has lived 6 years in the space between tips and weather and rumors that wore everyone thin. A folding table becomes a podium. The detective who never boxed the file states only what can be proven. The Street View timeline showed a repair sequence at mile 214. Side scan confirmed a vehicle. Recovery followed. Identification pending. He will not speak to the empty seat. He reminds anyone listening that black ice collapses distance and hides water until you are in it. The answers sound thin and exact at once, the kind that satisfy procedure and leave a human gap nobody can close with words. Funerals arrive on adjoining weekends so people can carry both. Jesse's fills a gym that smells like varnish and old nets. Ava's fills a church whose pews have outlasted several pastors. The stories are small and precise. Borrowed lecture notes, a joke about a bad headlight, a cabin list that included cocoa and batteries. The detective stands in the back, hands clasped, near a door he does not use. Naomi stays out of photographs on purpose, sends flowers through a local shop, and writes a single line the families will keep. Forensics takes its measured breath. The event data recorder speaks enough to draw a line, 58 miles an hour. No braking recorded in the final seconds, stability control active. A steering input left, then right. Power loss as water reached the intake. The hood carries a diagonal scrub at the rail's height. Paint transfer matches a low strike. A terminal cannot forgive on glaze ice. Tool mark analysis on the cut front passenger belt is honest about 6 years in water. Fibers frayed, edges blurred, results inconclusive about blade type. In houses that learned new silences, scenarios gather without a verdict. Riley may have cut free and run out of breath before she reached air. She may have surfaced, found the bank, and collapsed beyond sightlines the first thaw rearranged. She may have reached the road and taken help no one has traced. The detective writes them as possibilities and stops there. The families keep them in separate boxes because living now requires holding more than one truth while waiting for the one the world can prove. The case status changes with a phrase that satisfies paperwork and almost nothing else. Largely resolved. Evidence photos, autopsy summaries, and the buoy's coordinates slide into sleeves. The squad room board comes down. A single map dot replaces a corridor. Insurers send letters with words like remittance and final. 2 universities mail posthumous degrees in thick envelopes that sit for days on kitchen counters. A roadside memorial grows across from the turnout until the county shifts it a few yards for safety and promises to keep it neat. Months pass without daily calls. The corridor returns to being a road people use without thinking. In early autumn, Street View updates and the community thread blinks. At mile 214, a new frame loads, summer grass bright, sky clear, the terminal face still the newest metal on the run. On the shoulder, a small white cross leans against the post, plastic flowers sun-faded at the edges. The disturbed soil looks ordinary now. Naomi refreshes once to be sure it is not a cache. The detective opens the same frame and just looks. Headlines shrink to recaps you can hear while paying for coffee. The long version fits in 4 sentences. A winter road, black ice, a low strike, a launch into dark water, 2 recovered, a 3rd missing. What does not shrink is the question that sits under every quiet conversation when someone recognizes a name at a gas pump or in a checkout line. The belt was cut by somebody. The water does not say whether that somebody reached air. Friends learn to answer kindly when a stranger adds at least 2 were found, as if math could comfort. There are days the detective drives the bend before sunrise. He steps out and sets his palm on the rail where the outward bow is easiest to feel and hardest to photograph. Remembered metal is what mechanics call it, steel that learned a curve and came back slightly different. From the shoulder he can see the path the lift bags took and the spot where strangers now pull over and stand without speaking. He uses the same careful words if anyone asks, because accuracy is the only respectful thing left to give. The title of what happened never lies about what revealed the path. Street View gave a quiet clue a person could print and hand to an investigator, and it pointed straight down. It did exactly what technology can at its best: locate, corroborate, narrow. It could not show what followed the belt's clean ends or why a phone never found a signal. That part stays with the lake and with whoever took a breath in brown water and did not reach a porch light. The case is largely resolved, the cross appears in the next update, and Riley is still missing.